Hi, my name's John and welcome to my Metalwork 6R4 build. And if you haven't seen this before, it's a Porsche Boxster chassis with a Metalwork shell set on top. And in this episode, I really want to try and get a dash into this car and we'll decide which one we're going to use. But first, I have a bit of metalwork to finish off at the front end. Well, it's time to look at this absolute mess here and see if we can sort something out with it. So you might have seen in an earlier episode where I made this little pressed section here, and this goes in here like so, and that's the part you'll see whenever you open the bonnet. Okay, so yeah, it goes like so. So and I need to do something in between this new piece and the Porsche. Now I've actually pulled this bit of Porsche down here so that I've created a thicker box section, and that'll make it a bit stronger. Okay, so I started off with a piece of flat like so, and then I folded it into an angle. All right, and then what I've done is I've put it in the shrinker and stretcher, and I've shrunk it along the bottom here, and that's curved it down, and then I've stretched it this way, and that's curved it that way. So basically that's going to go in here like so. All right, so that'll go like that. All right, and this flange is going to allow me to spot weld the two pieces together. Okay, and then I've made a little piece here to infill this section here. So I'll get them welded in and we'll see what it looks like, and then we can move on towards this rear area. I seam welded that in and ground it down. It doesn't look too bad now. And down here I actually welded this from the inside, and that meant that I could grind it on the corner here on the outside and not actually have to touch the weld. So I've kept all the strength in it. Now I haven't actually assembled this top piece on it yet because I want to epoxy prime inside all these cavities before I assemble it, but I'll do that sometime later. Now getting on to this fuel cap, you can see now why it would have been easier for me to have this further forward and low down, but I just didn't like the look of it. Now the problem here is that the bulkhead is in here, okay, and I think what I'm going to have to do here is drill these spot welds out, okay, and try and push this bulkhead in here further that way, okay, and then I'll have to cut a section out from this outside piece just to get enough room for the tube to go down and meet in with the petrol tank down here, okay, and then some way try and build it back up again and try and make it look a wee bit better. Well, hopefully you can see from this angle that I was able to get this bulkhead back a bit. Now I do need to finish this off in here and tidy this up where I've bent this lip down, but it should be okay once it's done. Now the only problem here is that I've discovered that the thing that I was trying to do isn't actually going to work. So this here diameter here is 57 mil, okay, so it's 2¼ inch, and this here filler neck is also 57 mil, so that's why I bought a bit of 57 mil tube, okay, and this is proper filler neck hose, and it's meant to be flexible, but it is not flexible at all. So I just can't seem to get it to bend down soon enough. But what I discovered was that once you take this filler neck off, okay, down at the bottom it is 51 mil. So that's 2 inches, and that's the same as this diameter here. So I've ordered a piece of 51 mil internal diameter version of this here, which hopefully should be a good bit more flexible because it's much smaller. And it's also narrower, so I'll have more space. So I do need to fill this hole now, and I sort of want it to try and look tidy. So I think what I'm going to do here is get a piece of this. Now this is actually stainless, so I can't use this, but I'm going to get the same as this in mild steel. So it's basically 3-inch exhaust tube, and I'm going to put it in here like this, and I'll cut the bottom piece of it away, so I'll only use the top section of this. But once that goes in there and weld that in, okay, it should look pretty tidy, okay, but I'll have to wait for that to come. So for now what I'm going to do is try and fill this piece here. So I've made this template out. I'm going to try and make this all in one piece, but that's a tad ambitious. Well, that's that piece roughly cut out. Now it does need a good bit of tidying, but we're a long way off worrying about that yet. So I do want to try and put a bit of detail into this, a bit of a pressing. Now I do have a press tool that I made in an earlier episode, okay, which you might have seen, but it is a wee bit too big for what I need here. So I'm going to try and save the tooling that I had before. So what I'm going to try and do here is reuse what I had. So basically what's going to happen is I'm going to take this bit, okay, right, and put a little infill piece in it there, right, and then this bit of steel will go here, and then this bit will go on top, right, and I've made a smaller piece. Okay, so once I line this all up, I should be able to hammer this down and put a pressing in it, which will be this size. Now it might be a wee bit rough around this edge here, but we'll see how it comes out. Well, after a good bit of bending and messing about, I think that came out not too bad. The pressing's quite decent. I welded up here and here, okay, and I've ground it down, and I'm pretty happy with that. Basically, I can't fit any more metal in behind this wing because I can only fit about a piece of cardboard in between this and the wing, and it has to be like this here so it can clear the filler cap. So this is all I can do with this, so I'm pretty happy with it. I think the other side might look a bit better because I can make this slightly longer, okay, and transition it in better, but this bit here is so that the filler cap will fit. So I like that, and I like this bit, but I do not like this here. It is just weird looking. I don't like the way it comes here and steps down, so I'm going to have to do something with this. I'll have to cut this bit out that I put in. I'm going to see if I can try and do something with this here piece of steel and put a step in it. Okay, so basically hopefully it's going to come like this here and have more of an arc in it down to here, and then I'll cut this bit out here that I put in earlier and replace it with something higher up. And I might as well do this now because I haven't done the other side yet, and so if I get this sorted out it'll be easier on the other side. I'm going to try another unconventional move to get this job done here. Now we've been lucky so far and our luck's going to run out sooner or later, but we'll try this anyway. So what I want to do is try and put a step in it from here, gradually from here, and it'll be deeper here. Okay, so it's going to come here and lift up and come out. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I've took a bit of wood and I've screwed a bit of tongue groove to it, and I've cut the tongue off it obviously, but this is as ropey as you could possibly get, but hopefully it's going to do the job. So I'm going to take this bit of tin and I'm going to set it like so, and I'll put a hole in it here, a hole in it here, a hole in it here, and screw it down, okay, in place, and use these to spread the load. And then I'm going to take this bit of steel here, okay, and set it like so, and then I'm going to chop it down with the hammer. And hopefully, because I've got a bit of wood here, it's going to stop it. It's going to get a more gradual sort of step in it. All right, but we'll try it out here and see how we get on. Yeah, so it pretty much came out like I'd hoped. So I'd be happy enough with it. Now I ended up having to chop it with this bit of wood here, just on the edge, to try and force it in a bit more, because I could hit it a bit harder when I was focused on a smaller piece. But yeah, it worked out okay. It did sort of kink in this area here, but I put it in the stretcher here, okay, and stretched it out a tiny bit, and sort of took that kink out of it. So yeah, I'd be pretty happy with it. So I need to try and cut this bit out here, and then raise that up, and I think hopefully this should all work out a good bit better. Well, I do think this is a good bit better looking, so I'm pretty happy with it, and I think once I get it all sorted out it's going to look pretty decent. So since the last clip, the exhaust tube has arrived, and this is all I'm going to use out of it here. Now there certainly are men out there who could make this, but I could not, and I think it was £16, so I don't know how you would value your time, but I think even if you could, it wouldn't be worth making. So it's going to go in there like so, okay, and the filler neck has also arrived. It's a lot more flexible, so hopefully it's going to do the job. So I guess I haven't really any more excuses. I can now weld everything on the front of this car. Well, I actually think that looks an awful lot better, and it's a much nicer shape now. There's plenty of space in here now for the filler neck. The exhaust tube looks pretty decent in here. Now this all spot welded in place, and it's hard to see with the sunshine on it. But I've actually went ahead and done this other side too, okay? And I actually think this side looks slightly better because this section here is longer and there's a nicer transition into it, but it's what we can do with this space available. And this whole section is a lot stiffer now, so I'll be pretty happy with it. Now, I don't know what I'm going to do with this section here, how I'm going to join these, but I think that's a problem for another day. But for now, I'm happy enough to say that basically everything from the bulkhead forward is more or less sorted out here. Well, judging by some of the comments in an earlier video whenever I mentioned the dashboard, it could be quite a contentious issue, and different people had different ideas on what would be right for this build. Now, I do have a couple of other options open to me here. I could make a dashboard from scratch, but it would be a lot of work. I have a lot of stuff to try and integrate into it, and I'm not sure if it would creak or rattle when it's made. So for those reasons, I'm going to rule it out. Now, it might be something to do in a future build, but not on this one. I could also buy a rally car dash, which in a Metalwork 6R4 is basically a fiberglass or carbon fiber version of a left-hand drive dash, and so it would have all the instrumentation over on the passenger side, and basically the navigator, he would have monitored the condition of the engine, but unless I was going to take somebody with me all the time, it wouldn't really be a lot of use to me. So for that reason, I'm going to rule that out. So my only options here are either the Porsche dash or the Metalwork dash. Now I'll start by saying, in an earlier episode which you might not have caught, this is intended to be a road car, and so it is going to have an interior in it. Now at some point I might strip it out and do a track day in it or two, but for the most part it's going to have an interior, so it's worth bearing that in mind. Now I'll start by listing the things that I like about this Porsche dash. I like that it's got speakers up here, which would save me having to put them into the doors, which means I might not have to put any wiring into the doors, which would definitely simplify things. I like the dials, they're obviously going to plug straight in. I have the option here where I can fit one of those touchscreen head units, which for me would be quite the upgrade, considering the only radio I have at the minute is an 8-track. It also has an airbag. Now I know that wouldn't be particularly a rally car thing, but I do intend to drive my daughter about in this car, and since it's there, I would kind of like to keep it. And it is also a good bit more modern, but it is worth bearing in mind that this dashboard is now a 29-year-old design, because the Boxsters did come out in 1996. But I do happen to think it's a good bit better looking than this one, which I'm not even sure would have been stylish when it came out. But what I do like about this is that it's quite authentic. Now, it's not exactly the same as what would have been in a Metalwork 6R4. It's a few years newer, but it's more or less the same idea. Problems that I have with this are the dials. Obviously these, I couldn't use these. Could have used the ones from the Porsche in here, possibly. Maybe I would have to find some different dials. I'd have to try and get the switches to work with the wiring, or else try and get the switches from this dash to fit in here. I'd have to get the heater controls in, which is digital in the Porsche. But what we'll do here is we'll not rule it out yet. I will take a look at the car and see if this would go in. Well, I'm going to take a look inside this car here and show you the various problems there would be in fitting either dash, okay? And I'm not trying to convince anyone of what is right or wrong here, but you need to know the amount of work that's involved in either before you make your decision. So basically I think the Porsche dash would more or less go straight in, except for the fact that it's too long. So it needs shortened over here, and it needs shortened along the windscreen, okay, or profiled to match the windscreen. But I think aside from that, it would more or less go straight in. Now it does sit quite far back here, but I think it is acceptable. I think I would be happy enough with it, okay. As for the Metro dash, this here would definitely foul the dash of the Metro, okay, because it sits further in. So this would have to go. But this bar is what the steering column is bolted to. So if I get rid of this, I'm going to have to replace it with something else. So let's say it came across here, down and across. I think that would work, but I need to make sure I don't foul on this fan motor, okay? But let's say we could sort that out, I think. As for these vents, I think I could extend this vent here up to meet the dash for the windscreen. But this one would have to go. I'd have to do something else with this, but I think I could split this into two tubes and bring one out here and one out here for the Metro dash. So I think I could solve that. All of these relays and things would all have to go somewhere else. I'd need to do something with this center console because I couldn't leave it like this with all the sharp edges on it. Okay, so this would have to be covered. The main issue is on this side of the dash though. Right, so if I get out here, basically the Metro dash would finish somewhere around here. So that would mean there's 10 inches between the dash and the steering wheel. Okay, and this steering column is actually adjustable, so it goes a further 2 inches this way. So you're talking between 10 and 12 inches between the dash and the steering wheel, which wouldn't really be a deal breaker for me, but it would look a bit odd, and I'd have to do something with this column to cover it. Okay, some sort of shroud, but I think I could sort that. The biggest problem is probably this steering lock. Okay, and it's often some remote setup out the side of the column. Okay, you can see it like that. So the problem with this is that this lock would sit 4 inches out through the dashboard. So I think what I could do is I could unbolt this, okay, and set it off to the side, and it would still work as an ignition switch, but the steering lock wouldn't work. And I think there's something in the IVA test about steering locks, so I would really rather try and keep that. I think there might have been some other way around it, but let's say for a minute that I had to change the column in this to sort out some of these various issues here. I would then have to rewire a different ignition switch into the loom. I don't know what switch gear I would use. Ideally you would use this, but if it didn't fit, then you'd have to use a different set and rewire it in. As for the clocks, if you rewired a different set of clocks in, well, it would be a nightmare. But even if you move the Porsche ones around and you chop and change some switches and stuff in it, basically you're going to be in the territory where, see if I ever come out someday and this car doesn't start, nobody would work on it and nobody would be willing to try and diagnose what's wrong with it. Whereas if it still had all the Porsche dash and everything was in place, basically I could take it to any Porsche specialist, they could plug it in, work out what's wrong with it, and it would be back on the road. But once you start chopping and changing any of this here, you're basically on your own. So that for me would be a big issue, why I don't particularly want to use this Metro dash. Okay, and another thing is, once I have all this done, basically you would stand back and look at it and go, yes, great, it's got a Metro dash. But somebody would then be quick to point out, going, yeah, it looks great, but it doesn't look like a Metro 6R4 because you can't see the engine. And I think that instead of trying to see this as negative, I need to turn this around and see it as an opportunity to do something better. Well, I guess you probably figured out by now that I intend to use this Porsche dashboard. Now, whether you think that's the right decision or not is another matter, but you can certainly let me know in the comments if you like. But either way, this is what I intend to use. So I would have thought it's pretty common knowledge here, but basically the front half of a Porsche Boxster is the same as 911. So everything from the doors, and including the doors forward, is 911. So this dashboard is essentially the same. The only difference being is that this has 3 dials and the 911 has 5. So it's got an extra one here and an extra one here. But this part here is interchangeable. Okay, so basically what you're looking at here is a Porsche 911 dashboard. But if you went out at that time and bought a Porsche 911 GT3, which would have been the top of the range track day car at the time, it would have had this dashboard in it. But I also happen to have a set of Porsche 911 GT3 seats. Now these have came out of another project car that I have, and whenever it goes back on the road, it won't have these seats in it because I think they're a little bit too modern for it. But they do match this dashboard. They're the correct vintage, and they're quite nice. Now they're carbon backed versions. Okay, I will say that they are replicas, but the replicas have been discontinued for quite some time now, and the genuine seats are incredibly expensive. So basically what I intend to do here is have a Metro 6R4 with a full Porsche 911 GT3 interior, and I give it all the extra touches that a GT3 would have. I think that's going to be nicer to drive. It's certainly going to be a bit more interesting, and it goes hand in hand with this sort of resto mod vibe that a chassis swap car has, which is basically you take a car that looks older and make it drive like something much more modern. I set that dash into the car last night. Now initially I wasn't too sure about it, but I've given myself the day and I've looked at it a few times and came up with a few things can do it. And I think in the end I'm going to be pretty happy with it, but either way I'm going to continue on and see if I can get it all to fit, and even if I don't like it I can always try something else. So it definitely doesn't look like a Metro anymore, but then I guess it isn't a Metro, so there's that. I think it does look quite decent. Now the problem with it is that it does look like it's sitting kind of far back, okay? But it is the whole way up to the window here, and I actually haven't cut anything off this dash, so it is almost exactly the same profile as the Metro, and it is in the same place. Okay, so I think the difference here is that the pillar on the Porsche comes up and angles back a lot sooner and at more of an angle, and that's because it's in a sports car and this isn't. So I think that's why it looks like it does. But I think the main problem with this is the end piece of the dash. Okay, and this is angled back maybe 1.5 to 2 inches to suit the door card of the Porsche. But obviously this is going to foul on the Metro door, so this is going to have to go anyway. And I think once I take this off and try and maybe round the end of this dash, I think I'll be able to soften that out, and I think it'll look a good bit better and certainly a bit smaller. But even if you look at the back of the light switch here, now I just don't know how you would go about trying to wire that into a Metro light switch or try and fit that switch in the Metro dash, but then the sort of problems that you're up against here. So I think the first thing I need to do is try and get the doors closed, so I need to shorten the dash. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and heat this leather and peel it back, okay, to about here, and hopefully then it doesn't tear, and I'll be able to slice the dash and then shorten it, plastic weld it back on again, and then hopefully rewrap the leather back round again and save it, because I would like to not have to recover this if I can, but it might not survive. Well, I think this is definitely one of them cases where it's going to look worse before it gets better. So I've put this section of steel in here, and that's going to represent where the weather strip is going to go. Okay, now ideally I would have this all filled in, but this is a whole roll cage saga that is for another episode. But for now, what I want to try and do is put the end back on this dash. Okay, so I have this piece here that I cut out. Okay, and the plan is that I'm going to try and set it in behind here, like so. Okay, and obviously it'll be in further, and basically try and plastic weld them together here. Okay, and because I don't know what type of plastic this is, now I did look at, normally in a bit of plastic there is it tells you the type of plastic. It'll say like PU or EPDM or something, and that's the type of plastic that it is, so you can then get a welding rod to suit. But because I don't know, I've cut slithers off the dash from here. Okay, and I'm going to use this as the filler material. Okay, so to start with, what I'm going to do is I'll set this bit in behind, okay, and I'll put a couple of screws in it, maybe to hold it in place. Okay, I've got this heat, it's a hot staple gun is what you call it, and let's see, is there one of them staples about somewhere? Yeah, here's one here. So basically you heat those and push them into the plastic, okay, and that sort of holds it into place. Now I think they'll be more useful in certain places than others in this, but once we get it into place, I need a plastic weld together, and I've got myself one of these here. Now this is like the cheapest plastic welder you can get off eBay. I think this was about £40 or £50, and this was about 20 or something. So I haven't invested a lot of money here, but what I'm going to do is get it all together, plastic weld it into place, and then once it's done, I'm sure it's not going to be perfect, so I'm going to try and finish it off with a bit of this filler, which is a black plastic bumper filler, but hopefully that should get us pretty close. It still needs a little bit of work to finish it off, but it doesn't need to be perfect, because hopefully this leather is going to smooth out some of the imperfections, and hopefully it will stretch back round again. But I need to take it over to Audio Advice and get them to give me a hand to try and stretch it, because well, I think I could probably retrim most of the rest of the stuff in the car. I think this is a bit more specialised, so I think I'm going to need a hand with it. But now I need to move on to this section here, and it originally had a separate plastic section, and what I tried to do was trim it down here and see if I could make something out of it, and I was intent to plastic weld it, but it's not going to work. So what I need to do now is to make a separate piece for this, and working on plastic isn't really my medium, so I think what I'm going to try and do is make a section up in steel, okay, out of two pieces. So there'll be one piece here and one piece up here. Tack weld them together and then eyes upon it, and then use that to make a fiberglass mold and then make a fiberglass part out of it. Possibly maybe even carbon fiber to match the seats, but probably more than likely just fiberglass, and put a texturized finish on it. And this switch, I don't think this switch is actually going to fit anymore, so I think what I'm going to have to do is try and ditch this ring. Okay, I think it really only illuminates the lights. I don't think it's really that necessary. I think it should be lights on the dash to say which setting it's in, but I think hopefully I'll be able to just use this switch in it, and hopefully that's going to fit, but we'll worry about that later on. Well, I think overall I'm pretty happy with that, especially for something that I intend to mold later. Now I did put one of these pressings into the side of it. Now it does seem like I've got these everywhere, but the only one you can see aside from this is under the bonnet, so I think this will look okay, and I'll give it a bit of detail. And I say it's just tacked together here, but this is plenty good enough for molding. So what I'm going to do is grind this down and eyes upon it, and I will fiberglass mold it later on, but for now what I'm going to do is try and make it look like a piece of plastic. And there's a couple of products you can use for this, and basically they're used whenever you have to fix a plastic bumper. And this, well, you can already read this, but this is like a spray-on texturized black paint. Okay, but that one's very black, and I want it to be a bit grey, so this way you can put this is a black thing. This one is a texturized finish first, okay, and it's clear, and then this one is black. Well, it's called black, but it's actually grey. So hopefully by the time I finish with this, it's going to look like a piece of plastic. Well, you need to keep in mind that I probably spent about 45 minutes in this, between it being in bare metal and it being painted, so it's not perfect, but it's enough to give you an idea what we're going for here. Now, I don't actually think it looks too bad. One thing I could comment on, it's a bit blank down here, but I think once the switch goes into it, it's going to look a lot better. But I don't want to cut this until it's made in fiberglass. It's also probably a little bit too shiny, but I should be able to adjust that with a bit of matte lacquer, maybe, in the final version. Now, these screws here, they're obviously not the right screws, but they're actually in the position that they would be on the Porsche dash, but for some reason this one just looks weird out there by itself. I don't mind this one so much, but this one here, I think I want to try and get rid of it and try and hide a screw up in here somewhere. Okay, and finally, well, I do like the detail on the side. It's just not a flat piece. I don't like the way this is in an arc and this is flat. So I think what I want to do is take the paint off this with a bit of thinners, and I'm going to fill an arc into this, okay? And hopefully that should match the shape a bit better, but we'll see how we get on with it. Well, hopefully once I take this tape off, I should be left with kind of a nice lined shape around this. At least nothing too drastic to fill. Yeah, that should work. Well, you'll have to use a bit of imagination when it comes to this interior, because there's no carpet and no center console and wires hanging everywhere, but hopefully you'll get the idea. So I do think this does look a good bit better, and I certainly don't think it's going to be too noticeable once you open the door, which is really all I was aiming for. Now, to say, I do intend to remold this in fiberglass, but there is a possibility that I could do it in carbon fiber, but you can let me know what you think about that. Personally, I think it might be a bit noticeable, but it would tie in with the seats which I've set in here. Now, I do think this is now going to be a pretty nice place to sit, and certainly it's going to look a lot better once this leather is wrapped around the end of the dash. But the guy I need to give me a hand with this is busy this week, and I need to get back to some paying work, so I'll tackle this off camera before the next episode. Now, an issue that I've seen here is that this window winder is clearly not going to work, because it's going to end up hitting the dash whenever you try to rotate it, so I'm going to need to do something with this. I don't like this door handle here, because it looks like it's on a Metro, which I suppose it is, but I want to try and put one of these in it, which is basically a door pull off an air-cooled Porsche 911 RS model, okay, which is what would be on the lightweight racing sort of versions. But I'm going to have to try and make up some mechanism to make this work. Okay, I've also got the door pull off the same model of car, okay, so hopefully I'm going to end up with a Porsche 911 inspired door panel here. Now another issue that I have is that the car knows that the Porsche doors are not on it, and so every time I put the battery onto it, it puts the alarm off, which is kind of annoying. So I'm going to need to try and trick the car into thinking that the doors are on it, or else try and get the mechanism into the door. I would like to try and get it so that I could open and unlock the doors with this key, but I also want to have the minimum amount of wiring in this door as possible. But if you want, you can come back next time and see how we get on with that. See you later.